I think that's close enough. Call the meeting to order. Welcome everyone here this evening. And we'll get right down to business. The first item is approval of the agenda.
I make a motion we approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Old business, comprehensive plan. Joe?
Good evening, Mayor and members of the board. I'm going to provide a brief overview before I turn it over to our planning director, Michael Clark. So your first topic is on the comprehensive plan, specifically the land use and transportation plan chapters that will come before you. And we wanted to give you a primer on that. So I'll use an analogy that I've shared with you before. Think of the comprehensive land use plan as the blueprints to building a house, what rooms to build, where to put them, what size to make them, what kind of amenities to have in the yard. Think of your transportation plan as the network that supports that house. So as awesome as a house as you can build, it's only as good as the ventilation, the lighting, the plumbing that makes that house function. So I've used a farming analogy. I thought I would use a house analogy. And then your second topic for this evening is your water merger agreement that you entered into with the City of Raleigh in 2006. Zebulon is the last remaining municipality of the original 6 to merge with the City of Raleigh, and we'll present to you tonight some opportunities about how you could close out that merger earlier. And with that, I'll recognize Planning Director Michael Clark.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. As Joe mentioned, tonight we're going to give a primer, a very broad picture overview on both the transportation plan as well as the comprehensive land use plan. As you may be aware, in April, our consultants are going to be here with the actual draft plan to discuss the parameters of it, the intent of it, and really get into the details. Tonight is more about big picture type things of why we do this plan, how it relates to the other plans, and how it should and should not be used. To start, transportation and land use plans, what are they? Joe mentioned it perfectly. The comprehensive land use plan and the transportation plan really relate to that network, as well as specifically for the land use plan, the blueprints. This tells what the end product will be. Obviously, if anybody has ever built houses before, you get out and you realize there's field adjustments that have to be made. There's modifications that need to be made to the plan. But essentially, the plan is the guidance document that dictates how that house is going to be built. Whereas the Unified Development Ordinance, the standard specification manual, and a lot of the other tools that we have in our toolbox go to help build that plan to make that end vision a reality. But with planning, we also have to be careful. A lot of folks will think of planning based on only the parameters of what their existing boundaries are. It's a bit like the metaphor of the shark in a fishbowl. It only grows as big as the bowl. And for a long time, we've looked at our bowl as essentially our corporate limits as well as our ETJ. One thing that we're doing a little bit differently is we're looking a bit beyond into our full urban service area, realizing that at some point, our influence, whether it be through an ETJ expansion or through development and annexation, that does influence what happens within the core of the city. So it's really good to take a big picture look. We also look outside of those areas on how the neighboring communities and the neighboring counties, what their plans call for, because as much as planning sticks within a geographic boundary or a set parameter, our lives, our activities, especially here in Wake County, go well beyond those boundaries. We might go to dinner at a different municipality. The street network, the road network, obviously, like Joe mentioned, that network web, that goes beyond just the boundaries. And we need to make sure that we work well with the surrounding community on a regional perspective. We also need to make sure that we're not limited to what we have now. Can anybody tell me what this aerial photo is? This was taken in 2002. This is what the site looked like in 2007. This might help. This is the current aerial view of North Hills. That wasn't that long ago that it was essentially apartments and fields with a mall across the street. But because of good planning resources, they envision someday this could be a viable option. And I'm not saying that we should plan on getting another North Hills here, but those type of dynamics, that if we put those in place now, it can lend towards benefits. I'm sure back in 2000 when they first started planning, they weren't envisioning that, or even this, which is going to be their next phase that's they just announced a couple weeks ago, which is going to be a full mixed-use product on the other side of Six Forks Road. So part of urban planning is making sure we think big and not be restricted to what we have currently in town. What do land use plans do? They provide a vision for what the town could look like in the next 15 to 30 years, not so much a snapshot now. We have uses in particular locations that don't lend well to other uses. But with the comprehensive land use plan, we can think beyond what we currently have. They also provide guidance for both the staff as well as the planning board and the board of commissioners. With General Statute 160D, you have what's known as a consistency statement. In a couple of weeks, when we have come back before you with several rezonings, you'll, in addition to the motion, you also see consistency statements to show that is consistent with or inconsistent with the applicable plans as well as the Unified Development Ordinance. They also provide guidance for the development and business community. A developer wants to know, okay, what does the town envision in a particular area? Because they're going to want to invest their money, their resources, and their time in locations that are going to have a long-term lasting value, as opposed to coming up against constant pressure, not only from the immediate neighbors that think it's all going to be low-density residential forever and ever, but also against staff as well as the Board of Commissioners if it's going to be inconsistent with the land use plans. And finally, and most importantly, this document will act as a marketing tool and economic development tool for the town of Zebulon. This is something a lot of municipalities are starting to catch on to, that they can go to different trade shows with this as an economic development department. And that's why partly in the past it's been this big binder, more of a regulatory appearing document. But you see more and more where they're either having like an online magazine style format or something like a thick magazine style book, which they can bring in when they meet with developers or they meet with the chamber or potential business owners. They can show them, this is what we envision our town to look like. That little investment in terms of making sure the document is attractive leads to dividends in the end result, because it shows that the municipality is passionate about the future direction of its community. But we've talked about what it is. We also need to talk about what a land use plan is not. It's not a replacement for the Unified Development Ordinance. As I mentioned, one is the blueprints for the regulations or the future development, whereas the Unified Development Ordinance, that's a legal document. Those are the laws, essentially, as it pertains to land use within Zebulon, North Carolina. Yes, the two need to work together, but one does not replace the other. Just because the Unified Development Ordinance says something is residential and the comp plan says something is commercial, that comp plan does not supersede the Unified Development Ordinance. Those regulations still stand until somebody comes in and requests a change to our Unified Development Ordinance. It's also not the last plan the town will ever do. The beginning page in our existing existing comprehensive plan says that because the communities constantly change and grow and adapt, these plans must also grow and change and adapt. Obviously, since the last comp plan was done, things have changed pretty significantly. Therefore, in the future, 10, 15 years, or actually 5, 10 years from now, we're going to need to revisit these plans and make changes to them as situations change, development changes, and as well as technology changes. One of the things that are coming online now is the autonomous vehicles, and nobody knows how that's going to affect transportation plans. We're doing our best to just kind of guess and work through the details the best we can, but those technologies are going to have a lasting impact. We may not have a parking requirement for single-family homes in the future. We don't know. But those plans will always have to be adapted. In some states, they actually have statutory requirements. They be reviewed and updated every 5 to 10 years. North Carolina kind of hinted at that with the adoption of 160D, that it needs to be current and relevant, but they didn't put a time parameter on what current and relevant meant. It's also not absolute and chiseled in stone. There will be situations that come forward where a developer is going to want to do something that's going to be distinctively different, either in map or text from our comp plan or transportation plan. We need to take those at a case-by-case scenario. 160D fortunately did streamline the process where it requires one motion versus two, where if you approve a zoning text amendment or a map amendment, it automatically will change the future land use plan as it pertains to that element. While it provides guidance, it is not absolute. The other thing is it's not a crystal ball. There was a lot of plans done in the early 2000s called Vision 2020, and none of them foresaw 2008 and the economic recession. None of them saw COVID. Market conditions change. These give a best case scenario of what could be, but are not absolute and can't predict the future. If major employers come in and locate somewhere, that's going to have an impact, and that's then going to result in changes. And I think as a real local example of this, take Sydney Creek. Our current comprehensive land use plan calls for this as a long-range development area. They're broke ground. They're going to be building houses here, not the too foreseeable future. Nobody would have foreseen that in 2008. But given changing market conditions and given changing demand for housing, that project became suddenly viable for a developer, and now it's becoming a reality. So for the rest of this, I'm going to break it into two parts. First, I'm going to talk about the comprehensive plan and the details. Our existing comprehensive plan was last prepared in 2008. For a 2008 plan, it did a pretty good job of looking at the conditions at that time, and a lot of it was just before the recession hit, but it did provide a fairly decent overview for that context. However, with new general statutes, there are particular details that have to be included in it, and 160D, it has those parameters which our current plan does not apply to. Namely, being the age, it's not relevant to today's standards, but there's some other technical details that need to be addressed. Conditions are substantially different. We were growing at a much smaller pace. Our economic base was much different at that point in time. Our industrial base was significantly different at that time. But we've grown, we've expanded, and we're seeing record growth right now that definitely was not foreseen at that time. It also limits guidance to really our ETJ. It doesn't go beyond that, and that goes back to that one of the earlier slides, where with the new one, we're looking well beyond just the ETJ. Our current future land use map, as I mentioned, Sydney Creek is located here, which it didn't foresee possibility of development at that time. You also notice how mixed up all these colors are in terms of there's a lot going on that map. One of the things that we wanted to do is really look and see, okay, are all these land use categories really needed? With the new plan, some of the goals that we're really partaking in is making sure it's focused on current conditions as well as future projections. We're working with a really good consultant that is looking beyond 5, 10, 15 years on what we need to put in place now as the foundational principles and elements to guide those land use directions for us to achieve the goals that we want to in 15, 20 years. It will meet the requirements of 160D. Additionally, it will also include chapters for economic development. And this will not only be for economic development on a local level, but also the tourism development. We have some wonderful resources here that we haven't been fully capitalizing on. And if we can use those as catalysts to expand those opportunities, we should do so. But we need to really figure, okay, what is that going to look like? And can we just rely on activity at Five County Stadium? Or do we need to really work to make that more of a vibrant mixed-use area? And finally, it will guide land use decisions as they pertain to today's world. We have development that's coming in based on our Unified Development Ordinance, and that is a huge paradigm shift from our zoning code. So we want to make sure that our land use plan really works towards those guidances. This is the current draft for our future land use map. As you can see, the numbers of, it's a little hard to see here, but the number of use categories has significantly decreased. And I'll make sure that you guys get full-size copies of these maps ahead of time. But you'll notice also the insert on the right that it looks at the full area for our future or urban service growth area. One thing to note is once you get away from the core of downtown, the number of colors decreases. And part of that rationale is we want to really focus on infill development where possible and then grow it organically from there. One, that maximizes our availability for public services, because as you go away from the core of downtown, it becomes more expensive to provide for these services. Additionally, we have a lot of the utility infrastructure in close proximity. You also notice as we get away, the colors are limited, and that's partially because we've also coordinated with Wake County, who's in the process of updating their comprehensive land use plan and their map. They call it Plan Wake. We were involved throughout the process, and a lot of their goals met our goals when it came to the infill development and making sure we capitalize on the resources that we have, as opposed to Wake County just approving all of these subdivisions. They're going to really encourage infill development, especially when it comes to water and sewer connections. Zooming in a little tighter for East Wake County, you'll see Zebulon. The core of this area is our walkable center, and that's pretty much our traditional downtown area and the nearby neighborhoods. These are the areas that we've been investing a lot for pedestrian connectivity and everything else. Outside of that, community is more of your suburban areas. That's neighborhoods like Barrington, like Weaver's Pond, and those areas. Community reserve is areas that is going to be developed in the foreseeable future, but those are going to be contingent upon utility service connections. That's going to be the area north of Beaver Dam Creek up to Denman Road that's currently within our ETJ. And then once you get out of there, they're really calling for rural, where unless there's a shift in the utility availability, they're not going to really encourage any development. And then the little blue hashes, which are difficult to see on this screen, are the critical watershed areas. They're calling for that area to be preserved to the best extent possible with extraordinarily low density or no development. Our plan coordinates well with this plan. So how do these work together? Wake County is now focused on an infill development, especially within municipalities. Our long-range planning is consistent with their future land use map. Additionally, Wake County's plan is applicable to areas outside of our TJ without us having to expand the ETJ or for development to request annexation. So while we don't have regulatory control, the fact that our map is consistent with theirs shows that one, we're on the same page, and two, we have the same message. So in terms of the land use plan, what's next? As I noted, in April, the consultant will be here to walk through the details of the plan and get into the weeds of why things are the way they are based on the focus group discussions and the public input and everything else. The intent is to have a joint public hearing with the Planning Board and the Board of Commissioners in May at the regularly scheduled joint public hearing, with potential adoption of the comprehensive land use plan on June 6th. We'll also be looking as part of that to indicate that it is consistent with at that point, it'll be the newly adopted Wake County master plan, as they're in the final stages of that review as well. Does anybody have any questions regarding the land use plan component before I move on to the transportation plan?
I do.
Yes.
Enlarge a little bit on Wake County's plan applicable outside our ETJ without ETJ expansion, or applicant requested annexation. So what would change there? Are they positioning to deny ETJ?
No, they're positioning to tell developers that if they're going to connect to utilities, they're going to have to work with the town.
Right.
That they're not going to, they're going to really discourage development of these neighborhood-style developments unless they're connecting to utilities. They're not putting a prohibition on them or anything like that, but it's going to be a shift to really work with municipalities as opposed to completely on their own.
What's different than now? I know that somebody could go out there and put in their own septic treatment system for development, or supply a whole development from wells. Are they still going to allow that?
On a lot-by-lot basis, they will, but for when somebody comes in with these larger subdivisions, that the lot size is still adequate, it's not going to be as well received because their future land use categories for their map are going to become more consistent with our future intentions here in Zebulon to push that development to locate closer to town and then connect into the municipal water system. And part of the rationale behind that is the news with the radon levels and everything else and contaminated water resources. They want to make sure that the drinking water is as safe as possible. And the easiest way to do that is to make sure that they connect into the municipal water system.
So let's say that somebody has a tract of land between here and Pilot, okay, but still in Wake County, because there's some large tracts out that way.
There are?
So you're saying that they would not allow them to develop unless they attach to a municipal system?
I'm not going to say that they're not going to allow it. They're going to look at them on a case-by-case basis. And if there's a way to have them wait until the utilities are there, that's going to be the recommendation.
Well, okay, I guess there's a lot to talk about that, because waiting until the utilities are there, the utilities are generally put in by the developer.
That's correct.
So they're going to be there whenever the developer wants to pay to put them there. I know that we've struggled in the past with Wake County over ETJs. And I'm just wondering how this is going to shake out.
Well, this would only be applicable for areas outside of our ETJ, really for ones that have strict interpretation on the planned wake regulations, because within our ETJ, our Unified Development Ordinance is the regulatory document for that. But this is a big step forward where Wake County is now working succinctly with the municipalities to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Well, I understand that. I believe there is a restriction of, I'm not sure if it applies to voluntary petitions of annexation. Well, it would have to, because we no longer can annex.
That's correct.
So if you had a development more than 3 miles outside of town, how are they going to treat that?
It depends upon how they're going to provide water and wastewater services. Without the details of that, I can't tell you.
Well, heretofore, Wake County has stayed out of the utility business. I mean,
That's
they've
correct.
actually put in large transfer lines, but so far as subdivision utilities and that sort of, they've just stayed out of that completely. Do you think they're going that way?
I think they're going to continue that path where they're going to leave it to the municipalities.
Okay. I could just see some problems there with, you know, with distance and cost. And if a developer owns a tract 3 miles out, doesn't mean he can trade it for 1.5 mile out, you know, so you're stuck. I can see it as being a problem, and I'm just curious if they thought that through.
I'm sure that they have. I know we had a lot of conversations, and there was a lot of meetings with other municipalities regarding this.
Well, I understand that. The reason I'm laughing at it is I've seen stuff that they thought through before. It didn't work out so well. So, but anyway, I won't belabor the point. You kind of sort of answered my question.
Okay.
We'll just have to see how it goes. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Any discussion about the watershed, like west of 96, reducing some of that landlocked area?
I asked that question early in the process about what their intent is, and as of right now, they're still looking with an eye on protection for the existing boundaries. Outside of the existing boundaries, it depends upon how far out it is from either like a node, like a transportation node, or corporate limits in terms of when that development will occur.
I still believe, just to insert there, that they could allow conservation subdivisions in the secondary watershed and have a much safer product than filling it up with septic tanks. But just so you know, I think they could do that. I've told you that before.
Yes.
So, okay.
Anybody else? Okay. To shift gears, pun intended, to transportation plan. Our current transportation plan has been updated multiple times over the past couple of years. And the drawing on the right illustrates at least one of the more recent iterations of the number of different lane or road categories that we have. You'll notice they stop at certain points, major cross streets, where development is continuing past those cross streets. One of the things that we looked at is trying to figure out, okay, what is the intent behind a lot of these different cross sections? Why are they so many? With a goal to really, let's be able to work with the developer, create the necessary flexibility, but still allow the town to achieve necessary right-of-way widths and designs that would be the best suited for our long-term intentions. Currently, there's some roads that, when these neighborhoods were developed, they were substandard. Since then, the plan has been modified, but these neighborhoods have already received their necessary approvals, so it becomes a challenge at this point to go back and acquire additional right-of-way or additional funding for these roads. That's why making sure that we get this right now is so critical, because as future developments come online, we're going to be looking to the revised transportation plan to determine what is the appropriate cross-section. In certain situations, we'll rely on other plans, such as the plan from Wake County and Metropolitan, or the Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, also known as CAMPO. It's a mouthful. They have plans, we work with them, but we needed to really figure out long-term what's going to best suit the town. So with this, one of our consultants specializes in transportation. They look at very long range. Not only was that map, but they looked at the entire future growth area of where it would be practical, reasonable, and understood within the parameters and the time frame of this area for these developments to expand, and what is the necessary road connectivity that's going to be necessary to make sure it's safe. It's going to provide the greatest opportunity to work with the development community. When you see this draft plan, some of these are a lot wider than what we have right now. But if there are certain situations where we can allow for a narrow road and the developer requires it, we could take that into consideration. You'll also see a lot less colors. It really simplifies the cross sections and makes it much easier to work with the development community and say, these are our base cross sections. If you wish to modify this, please provide an alternative, and then we would take it into consideration. And it goes beyond just vehicles. It includes what's called complete streets and walkability. Complete streets really looks at all modes of transportation, not just getting in the car and driving down the road, but maybe you want to walk or a bike path. It really takes the full encompass picture beyond just the vehicles. And this is the draft of the revision. You notice that there are only essentially really 3 color classifications. We have the local streets, which a lot of those are going to be dictated by the development, so we didn't include those details. Then we have a 4-lane with a divided median, and then a 2-lane with a divided median. In both situations, those act as traffic calming devices. But as development comes in, we can determine, okay, is it more appropriate to have a turn lane as opposed to a median? There's a lot of different factors that can be taken into consideration. One thing we also did is make sure that we worked with our partners, with Campo as well as Wake County. As I noted, we looked big picture. This is the schematics for the full urban service area in both pedestrian connectivity as well as vehicular connectivity. We're working with our Greenway plan also on bike connectivity as well. But you'll see that sometimes these go even outside of the county in terms of long-term perspective. We also had several meetings with town of Wendell regarding connectivity into their system. Obviously, with roads, it's good if they line up. We wanted to make sure we understood what their intentions were with certain roads and what our intentions were with certain roads to make sure that there was as much of a cohesive regional network as possible. The other partner that we worked with extensively is the Northeast Area Study, which is a plan that Campo uses when it looks at the regional perspective. The Campo partners includes Franklin, Nash, and parts of Johnston County, as well as Knightdale, Wendell, Zebulon, Rollsville, as well as all the Wake County areas in between. It looks at not only what we need now, but also 15, 20 years from now. Part of the reason that's important is it really incorporates projects with the North Carolina Department of Transportation to help them figure out which plans need to go into which timelines and which capital improvement project focuses. It could be everything from the expansion of 264 and 64 to I-87, but also looks at these corridor projects such as 39, 97, 96, and how all of those work together. It also looks at things like Green Pace Road. Is it going to remain a 2-lane? Is it going to get wider? Sometimes it also goes beyond just the vehicles. There's opportunities for cars, trains, bikes, and pedestrians. Yes, there's even a plan to utilize our existing rail system called East Trans, which would incorporate having a park and ride station at 5 County Stadium where you could hop on a train and take it all the way into downtown Raleigh. That's still on the books as a possibility at some point. Maybe not within my career, but making sure that it's on the part of the plans now is significant. The Northeast Area Study, you'll notice this is the entire section. Like I said, they look at a lot of different interconnections on not only what needs to be new roads, but also widened roads. And specifically for Zebulon, you'll see that there's a lot of overlap between our land use plan and theirs. There's still a couple things that we were going to add in after additional discussions that they show on theirs, including that bypass. There's some realignment things that they're going to need to make that work. But having these on these plans is extremely important. Namely because it improves funding opportunities. As you know, we go before Campo on occasion to request funding for particular projects. One of the biggest things that they need to know is it on your plan? If it's no, then it's probably not going to happen. Next thing is it on the Northeast Area Study Plan? Because if it's yes, then we get points for that. Making sure those two plans work together is significant. It also provides a regional perspective for local needs. as an example, this is the Proctor corridor for where it meets Pierce's to Shepherd School, Old Bun area. This was reviewed as part of a safety project in coordination with NCDOT, and this is the existing recommendations that's going into the Northeast Area Plan, namely to make this area safer because it has 6 times the number of accidents for similar corridors within North Carolina. That is very significant in the eyes of NCDOT. Something like that should not occur. Unfortunately, it does, especially as new developments come in and the road network is inadequate to provide for their safety. So having design, schematics, details, and prioritization such as this really benefits the town to make sure that we're able to be right up front and able to achieve or obtain the funding necessary to make those projects reality. It also establishes the foundation for the larger 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. This is the big picture, we want it all type plan that really incorporates all of the projects for Wake County and the metro area, looks at long-term planning and coordinates with NCDOT to make sure that we're starting to figure out how those funding sources are going to be now, being that these projects are still going to be 30 years out. That's kind of where the East Trains project sits right now, is that's probably going to be about 30 years out. So in terms of this one, what's next? Once again, running parallel systems. April, the consultants will be here with the details on all of these plans to go through what they are, why they're important, and what you should be looking for in each of those. We do hope for the May 10th joint public hearing with the adoption of the Comprehensive Transportation Plan on June 6th. Additionally, the Northeast Area Study will be in the final recommendation study or point at that time, and they're going to be asking for an endorsement to indicate, yes, this is consistent with our goals and objectives as well as our transportation plan. So to summarize, these plans need to work together to become effective. We've seen situations recently where residential developments have been established, and unfortunately it's caused negative traffic implications because our transportation plan did not meet the parameters necessary to accommodate those developments at that time. They think long term. It's not a this is going to happen tomorrow. It's more of a this is going to happen 5, 10, 15 years down the road. It paints a picture of what the ideal feel of the community is. Is it going to be North Hills, or is it going to be white picket fences, a walking distance of downtown? We need to make sure that we paint a clear picture now, because if we don't paint it, we're just reacting to development pressures later on. And more so, it's going to go beyond what's practical today. If we want something like North Hills, we need to make sure that we call it out. Even if there's 0 chance of this happening tomorrow, we need to make sure it's on the paper today to help guide the future development. And Daniel Burnham is essentially the architect for Chicago, and he once said, make no little plans, for they have no magic in them to stir men's blood. And these plans need to be specific to really energize the community, as well as providing for guidance documents. And with that, I am available if anybody has any questions.
Question? If not, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Joe, water merger.
Good evening once again. The outline of the presentation that I will offer to the board, it will go over the merger history, and then we'll focus most specifically on the Second Amendment proposal. The Second Amendment was what we were directed to go and negotiate with Raleigh staff and bring you back some considerations. As far as the merger agreement and the First Amendment, I have put in front of you hard copies. They're extensive documents. What I've done is, as you go through them, we're not going to go through them tonight. This is really just a chance to give you an overview. While you should read everything, I've highlighted what I think are the most important parts, and I've put in the margins in red just some greater description. So this is the merger agreement that's in front of you. That was executed in 2006, and then a few years later, when we went through the Great Recession that Michael referred to, there was a First Amendment, and what the First Amendment did was the town at that time sold back 300,000 gallons of sewer capacity, and the pro forma, or the payout schedule, changed from 15 years as with what it was in the merger agreement to an 18-year cycle. So those are the big changes. Again, I've highlighted some pertinent points in there for you to review on your own. As far as the Second Amendment, that's what we're going to talk most specifically about tonight. The Second Amendment, and this again is highlighted for you, it essentially has four main components. There's actually a fifth one, and I'll talk about that near the end. The first is this notion of selling back water. So the Second Amendment includes selling back 100,000 gallons. Selling back sewer, in this agreement, sells back 250,000. So when you first saw this, those earlier iterations, it was 390,000. And that changed because of what I'll talk about on that fourth point, the scrubbed projects. And in addition to the selling back of water and sewer, there was the transfer of cash of $500,000 that you had collected in impact fees. And then the scrubbed projects, I will go ahead and take some time to talk about this. So if you pull out your merger agreement, and you turn to page, it's table D, or exhibit D.
41.
Very good. Okay, that's a list of all the projects that the town of Zebulon was responsible for paying for. And then fast forward, when the First Amendment came along, there was also some projects in there. Pretty much the projects that were in the First Amendment were the same as the ones that were originally put in there for the merger agreement. But there's one project that we're going to talk about specifically that was modified between the merger agreement and the First Amendment, and that is a parallel line that runs along Highway 97 to bring more water capacity to the town of Zebulon. So those are the primary conditions of the Second Amendment that's in front of you. That the town of Zebulon will sell back water, they'll sell back sewer, they'll transfer cash, and they'll get some credit for some projects that were scrubbed. Scrubbed was either they were rescoped and the scope of those projects were dramatically reduced, or in some cases, they were completely dropped. Before we get into the details of that, let me talk to you a little bit about where you are right now with the water capacity that you have. The two bottom lines on that graph, the lowest line shows your actual use up through this fiscal year, and then beyond FY21 is a projection of what you're expected to use. That line that's immediately above it, that's what's called the maximum day demand. And so while you've got an average demand, which is the line at the very bottom, there are peaks that occur. Peaks occur when you have big demand uses. So it could be a fire, it could be large water consumption when people are watering their lawns. And so that max day capacity accounts for the spikes that occur and go above and beyond the average day use. So those bottom two lines, those are an indication of the water that you have used on average and the water you have used in maximum. That top line, that shows how much water capacity you have been granted per the merger agreement and the First Amendment and what will or what is the proposed Second Amendment in front of you. And when you take a look at any of the agreements, whether it's the merger agreement, the First Amendment, or the Second Amendment, they all have those parameters that are described above that top line. So 4% growth starting in FY11 up through 2021, 3% growth from that point on up till 2031, and then at 2031, a growth rate that is determined by the City of Raleigh. Those conditions have not changed from the merger, the First Amendment, and what's in the Second Amendment. By the way, if y'all have a question, I know I'm throwing a lot at you, it's fine to interrupt if you got a question.
Yeah, I want to be clear. You said a growth rate as determined by the City of Raleigh. What you really mean is what Raleigh's growth rate is.
Yes,
Okay.
that's exactly right.
There's a difference there.
You're right.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? All right, on the sewer side, similar conversation. There's a little bit of a difference here on when the compounding starts, and the reason is Zebulon was in a special category in the fact that they actually had a wastewater treatment plant, and so they had some capacity already within their own system. So the compounding starts a little bit later, but as far as the growth rates and the time frames after that, they're the same as they were with what you see on the water side. So again, 4% growth rate until 2021, 3% thereafter, and then the Raleigh growth rate after 2031. So that's what it looks like in the sewer. So the distinction or the difference between this top line and this actual use line shows how much water, or in this slide, how much sewer capacity you have. So what does that look like from a development standpoint? I'll try to use the cursor to describe what's going on here. This light gray line that I'm roughly going over, that is your town limits. Pretty much this is contiguous. You've got an extension here that goes along the railroad tracks and pulls in Five County Stadium. You've got a piece of property that was pulled in by annexation to the south side of town. And you've got this area, which is Weaver's Pond. There's a little bit of a gap there. But everything that's in the light, or that is bounded by that light gray line, that is your existing town limits. The darker blue line represents your extraterritorial jurisdiction. The blue shading shows what areas you can serve with your existing water and sewer capacity. So right here, right now, you've got enough water and sewer capacity to not only meet your town limits, obviously, but beyond your extraterritorial jurisdiction. If you sell back the 250, and we think it's actually going to be less than that when some of the capital projects close out, and the 100,000 in water, the difference is going to be that. So I don't know if you picked up on that, but that red area at the very tip, that is what you would not be able to develop by selling back the water and the sewer that's proposed as sell back amounts in the Second Amendment. Again, that was a lot, so I'm just going to pause to see if you have any questions or comments.
I'm having a little bit of difficulty so you're saying that anything within the red line we wouldn't have capacity for. How about that's in the white?
Do you mean
Yes.
this right here?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you wanted to grant development of everything that's in that light shade of blue, you would not be able to develop today in that. The light shade of blue represents your existing capacity. So if you were to develop everything in the light shade of blue, you couldn't develop in the gray today. But as I mentioned in the previous graphs, your capacity continues to grow over time.
Yeah. My concern, Joe, is comparing us to, for example, Wake Forest. 20-some years ago, they were 5,000 people. Today, they're pushing 50,000. And I tend to think the same thing's going to happen down here. And I don't know that we're gonna be able to handle that growth strictly within the blue area.
You don't think that, here, I should go back.
Well, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, it's just kind of a gut feeling, but looking at the way that they have exploded, the way that Roseville is exploding, we all know what's happening on the western side of the county, but people have now discovered us out here at Wendell, Zebulon. So I think that, I don't know what growth projections you have in the green and the brown line there.
All right, so let me see if I can't answer your question. So we're on FY '21 right now.
Right.
Got between this line, this line, and this line is your capacity,
I got that.
okay? So right there, at this point right here, you can develop to that, and that reflects everything that's in that light blue. From that point forward, you can grow at, in this case, 3% a year.
So you're projecting that we're gonna grow at 3%.
Well, that's what you'll have the capacity to grow at.
I understand, but what are you projecting that we're gonna grow at? Do you have a thought on that?
You want to answer? I'm gonna recognize Mike on that.
As with everything, like Joe mentioned, we don't have a crystal ball, but our 3-year average over the past 3 years shows that we're growing at approximately 7.5% increase. And even with that, it'll still take us many, many years in order, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but in order for us to develop our entirety of the ETJ. By that time, with the 3% growth rate, we'll be able to extend into that white area. Right now, we have more than enough water to serve the population of Wake Forest. And we're only a small component of that, and we're going to be growing in terms of our water allocation based on the agreements.
Okay, well, in the brown line, if I've got them right, are you projecting 7% growth?
I believe that was a number that came from Raleigh in terms of their projections. Is that correct, Bobby? Yes, I'm not sure what number or what growth percentage they show with that brown line.
Okay. I understand the difference going up to the blue line. I get that. I just don't know if that brown line should be a little more aggressive than what's showing there. And I don't know is the operative word. I just, you know, if it's projected at 3, then no, it's not radical enough because we're doing 7. Will we do 7 next year and the year after? I don't know, you know, but.
Well, I can tell you that over the past, we have not met 5% over the past 3 months in terms of new home starts.
Right.
So we're seeing a dip, and that's reflective of the cost of lumber and some other factors that are being taken into consideration.
Well, the other piece of my concern, though, goes beyond residential growth. It goes into, you know, what industrial opportunities might come our way in the future, and I have no way of knowing that, and neither do you.
That's correct.
You know, but I don't want to slam the door on our capabilities. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
But before you leave, Mike, sorry, I wanted to catch him before he sat down. With what we currently have approved, once that is all built out, all of those developments are built out, do you have an idea of what percentage of growth that will be? Where is that going to take us with this line?
Once everything is built out within the time frame and the parameters, it's going to be pushing 8%.
Okay.
But in a lot of situations, we've heard from a couple developers that those timelines are going to be extended out. As of last fall, all of our existing approvals were going to be within a 7-year time frame, but there's a couple that are pushing out to like 8 or 9 years now. And that's reflective of the conditions with the lumber costs, as well as the sales aren't as strong as they anticipated them being. We're going to see what happens from there, but like I said, we're seeing permit slowdowns already.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, so let me make a couple of comments. One of the reasons we're sharing this with you is to get questions from you. And so one of the things that we'll do when we come back, because it's our intent to bring this back to your board meeting on April 12th, which you do not have to approve. It's just that's the next time we can bring it back to you. We will bring back confirmation on what the growth rate of this line is, okay? So that's one thing that we'll owe you. The other thing I wanted to say is this. Thinking beyond residential, thinking about industrial, these things don't happen in a vacuum. So as an example, Holly Springs just had a big biomedical score, right? But they planned for that. They put that in their land use plan. They put that in their growth projections and their water and sewer capacity. And so this is not something like, well, I want to plan for some sort of contingency and I don't know if it's going to happen or not. If you want a particular industrial growth, you have to put that in your land use plan because then that makes a reflection on how much water you've got or need.
Well, I know, Joe, that we or whoever's sitting here has to analyze potential industry that might come in and its impact on the community. I recall some years ago we had a photographic lab that wanted to come here, a rather large one, and we actually turned them down because of the impact on the wastewater system. We were not capable of handling, not the capacity, but the chemicals that they had. Now, we can talk about pretreatment and all that, but the point is that at that point in time, we actually turned down a rather large industrial development. So we do have to analyze what their impact is, meaning what water consumption. I would hate to think that we're going to be in a position not to supply enough water to get a really nice industry. But on the other hand, they may have a sour impact on our waste system, and so we wouldn't want to do that. I know I'm rambling here, but that's kind of how you have to analyze these opportunities when they come in. Is it an opportunity we really want or not, based on the impact on the community?
Yeah. So I'll share this to maybe further belabor the point, is if you are interested in a type of industry, then you should plan for that in your land use plan, meaning you should cordon off the right amount of land, meaning the size and the location of the land. And if you put that into your land use plan, then you can make sure that you've got enough reserved water and sewer capacity. That's all I was trying to say by giving the Holly Springs example.
Yeah, I understand that's easier said than done, as you know.
It is.
But yes, you're exactly right. We need to plan for it. And that's all I want to be able to do, is to be able to do that.
Okay. All right, as I said, we'll come back to you and verify the growth rate of that, of the projected water use. I'm about to get into closeout scenarios. Is there any other questions either on this map of what I've already presented? Okay. So here are your closeout scenarios to consider. One, if you sell the capacity, again, that's on the water and the sewer side. The water is 100,000 gallons. The sewer is 250,000. The transfer of cash is 500,000. You could close out this merger agreement next month. If you hold on to the capacity and the cash, at a minimum, you will not be able to close this merger agreement out until April of next year. And I put in parentheses next to there, that's assuming that a capacity project is not needed. One of the projects that got scrubbed, probably the best example to provide to you is take a look at the First Amendment. These did not come numbered, so I numbered them in red on the bottom right. This is page 28 that I'm looking at.
I don't have a page 28.
Exhibit D. Is it Exhibit D?
It goes from 27.
Are you on?
Where am I supposed to be?
Let me see. No, I'm referring to the First Amendment. So the First Amendment looks like this.
Are you looking at the page in the upper left-hand corner? It says page 29 of 32. I think that's where you are. You barely make up the 28 down here, but I think it's this one, 29 and 32.
Did you find it, Beth?
It's like 3 or 4 from the back.
You exhibit D.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Here's the first part of exhibit D.
This is what I'm going to reference.
Okay.
So we're doing Exhibit D,
This is the one I'm looking at.
the one up above it, that one.
Eight? Seven. Okay.
It was in there. Is it not in there? It's not in here?
It is.
Well, then I don't need yours. If I can find it. 20, I can't read. Well, I can't see it, but there's two. That way? Okay. Yeah, there we go. I got it. Thank you.
Okay, so the reason between the difference in the April 22 and the January 23 all hinges largely on this project that's listed here, which there is a 16-inch line that runs along North Carolina 97. The only reason that project stays in here is if Zebulon needs it because they need more water. Okay, that's the reason. There's already a line there. They're going to put in a parallel line to provide more water to the town of Zebulon. But if you close out before you actually experience the growth, that's on the city of Raleigh. So that's the big distinction. So if sometime between now and, let's say, April 22, if the need for that project emerges, then the payout schedule for this merger agreement is January 23.
Say that one more time. I'm having a hard time hearing, and I apologize for that.
Okay. If you hold on to the capacity and the cash, at a minimum, the payout for the Raleigh merger is going to be April 22. That's as soon as you can pay it out. There's the potential, though, that the payout will go longer than that. And the reason for that is if a project that's currently listed here has to be installed, and that's to put in a parallel line. There's already a line running down Highway 97. They put in a parallel line, which is to put in another pipe to bring more water. If that project is required to be put in to meet growth demands, then that's going to be on the burden of the town of Zebulon to finance part of that.
But isn't there a water line on Business 264 or 64?
There is.
And why can we not backflow coming out of Wendell with that?
It's not. It's just like a straw. When the demand is so much, you just need to add another straw.
It's not big enough.
That's it.
Are we drawing any through that now?
Well, the 97 line that's there right now, we are.
I know we're doing that. I was
But-
talking about the 64 business
Oh,
line.
I'm confident we are. It's, I would be, I mean, I don't run their business, but I would be surprised that it's not circulating. Yep, there you go. I got the go sign. Yes.
We're pulling on it on do it now. They're basically creating a loop so there's no continuous flow of fresh water. Yes, sir. We'll actually go use both of them parallel. Okay. All right.
And so what kind of likelihood is it that we would need to finance that project? Like that it's going to happen before April 2022?
Yeah, I wish that's the, in this case, the $3 million question. The city of Raleigh will start to update their master plan this summer, maybe this fall at the latest, and that's when we would have a better indication about what is the need for that additional pipe.
Well, based on your projections, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Based on your projections here, I can't imagine that we would need it before then. Your projections are capacity based on current flow rates, is that right?
Right. That's assuming that what was, remember, we owe you to make sure that those growth patterns are correct about how much water we're using and how much water we are going to use. Understand what I'm about to tell you is strictly intuition. You've got a lot of vacant land, and you are growing very quickly. You're growing much quicker than at any time when I was in Cary. And so I would hate to chance it. I would, if I were to bet, I would say it's more likely that you're going to need that line than not need it, based upon how quickly you're growing and the amount of vacant land that is yet to be developed.
In the next year?
Yep.
You think we're gonna need it within the next year?
I don't know if you'll
I know
need
it's
it.
a shot in the dark, Joe.
I don't know that you'll need it, but I do feel confident, just understand this is intuition. I do feel confident that if it shows up on the master plan and you still haven't closed out the merger agreement, that you'll be responsible for paying for it. So will it need to be installed? No, but I bet you Raleigh will say this project needs to be put back on the books. Whereas if we close out, it's their responsibility to meet our demand.
So what if we closed out in, well, just pick one, April 2022, and we've closed it out, is it their responsibility after that?
If that project makes it onto, right now it's on the merger agreement. It's on the merger agreement as far as the First Amendment. You are obligated to pay it right now. So your closeout is January 2023.
I get it.
What they have offered you is they're scrubbing that off of this agreement and they're taking it off of the books.
But I want to be clear. If we, let's say that we close out in April 2022, okay? I don't believe we're going to need that second line before that date. Now, that's intuition as well. So beyond that point, it would be their responsibility, not ours. Is that what you're saying? Once this agreement's closed out, it's their responsibility.
That's correct.
So if it closed out in April of 2022 and it was needed in June of 22, it would be their responsibility. Now, I realize it's not going to happen that fast, but I'm just trying to use a date.
Yeah, that's well, as it stands right now, Zebulon's responsible for it. This project that I'm just talking about, the hypothetical, it's in the First Amendment. It was in the merger agreement, it's in the First Amendment.
Well, that's adding another, not quite a year to the project. I mean, it's being paid for out of utility revenues, right? They're not talking about us going back and coming out of tax base or tax dollars or a bond that we're responsible for.
No, but Zebulon's going to pay, and here's how they will pay. In June of this year, they go from, for the past, let's see, let me get my dates right. Okay. Up until June of this year, you have, or your constituents have been paying 5.5% increases annually.
Right.
After this, after 21, and to make sure that the debt gets paid off by 23, they not only have the right to continue the 5.5% increases, but they have the right to add a surcharge to that as well. So they're going to find a way to pay off this merger agreement by the time it's supposed to be paid off.
Okay. But, and I'm gonna circle back to be sure I
Okay.
understand. I hate to be dense on this, but.
This is a very important
Well,
discussion.
I've,
So
I've dealt with this since the very first agreement.
Yep.
So I've been down this road. Let's suppose, and I know this is not where you want to go, but let's just suppose that we keep the cash and the capacity and we scrub that out, that second line out. And we pay this out in another year. If that line goes in after that, Raleigh's going to pay for it out of their money and ours, the utility system. There will not be a surcharge for it.
it will be paid for by Zebulon ratepayers at Raleigh rates.
Right.
But if the need for that line comes about before April 22,
I get that.
okay.
And I have a hard time believing that's going to happen.
So that is,
But I don't have a crystal ball.
yeah, that's the $3 million, literally the $3 million question that you all have to wrestle with.
I just personally, well, I guess the next question then is who determines whether we need it or not? Let's suppose that in January of 22, Raleigh comes along and says, well, you need it, and you need it right now. And we say, no, we don't need it right now. Where do we go?
Well, here's how it will shake out, is it will happen much sooner than January, probably happen this summer, maybe this fall. They'll take a look at your growth patterns. They're getting ready to look at your, revise your growth patterns to see if you need this line. And once they've determined that you do need the line, you're contractually bound to pay it.
Okay. Well, it's a real roll of the dice then, because what I think you're telling me is we do not have the capacity right now to receive the amount of water that we have purchased.
Say that one more time.
We don't have the capacity right now to receive the amount of water that we are purchasing.
That's correct.
Right.
So-
So how much capacity do we have to receive? I know how much we have purchased, okay, I get that. Because back when we were producing at 1.2 million out of our plant and we were purchasing 1 million a day from Raleigh, and then this, for y'all to know, the new evaluation of Little River came along and they said, oh, you can't pull near 1.2 million. You can only pull maybe 200,000-300,000 gallons a day off of Little River. And that's what really pushed a lot of this to start with. We're trying to decide whether to merger or just straight buy more capacity from Raleigh without a merger agreement. But the point being, Joe, is that how much can we get through the pipes to Zebulon right now? So how much pad do we have
Yeah,
for
so-
current growth?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say that.
That's fine.
I wrote a note to myself, we'll give you an idea when we come back.
Okay.
Where you all are in capacity.
Yeah, I think it's a very valid question.
No doubt, everything's a valid question. This is a very big decision.
Right.
One thing that I'll share with you is when you're considering about whether you roll the dice, to use your words, is that red dot worth it? Is it worth it just to close it out now? Or is it worth it to possibly have to pay this out till at least April of next year, possibly January 23 for that red area?
Well, one other question I have, and if you throw something at me, I hope you miss. If we took this $500,000 and just paid them the $500,000 and kept capacity, when would we pay out?
I'm going to try to restate your question, just to make sure I got it
But
right.
you can do the research on it. I just would like to know.
I might have the answer.
Okay.
Was the question, keep the cash and just sell back the capacity?
No, give them the cash and keep the capacity.
It probably swings it a month.
1 month.
Yep.
That's all.
And the reason being is the way that the merger agreement was set up was it was a compounding formula. So $500,000 today is nothing compared to $500,000 at the start of the merger.
So then how much are we paying them each month? By double, how much cash is going against the pro forma each month?
Well,
And it wouldn't be the total water bill, it should be half of it, roughly. I have no idea how much cash we're generating in a month's time.
I don't know if this is answering your question, but if 500,000 buys you a month, then $1 million buys you another month.
So what you're saying is that we roughly are paying them $500,000 a month out of our water rates.
I don't know what we're paying them out of our water rates. I know that when you look at the model, the financial model, giving them the 500,000 or holding on to the 5,000 swings it a month. So I was saying if you just want to throw cash at the problem, so to speak,
Yeah,
you're swinging it a month for every 500,000.
okay. Well, I'm surprised. I thought it'd be more than that, to be honest with you. But, you know, if we are collecting 10 million a month, and I don't think we're near that amount, but let's suppose in water bills we're collecting 10 million a month, then half of that is going back to the pro forma, so 5 million a month is going to pay down the pro forma. I mean, to me, in rough math, it's pretty simple. It's just a matter of how much are we collecting each month off of our water customers.
We can come back and share that.
I would appreciate it. I'd like to know that, and I didn't expect you to come in here with that, to be honest with you. So, but it's something to know, and you're right. This is a big deal, you know, a very big deal. So, anyway, sorry. I'll let you get back to you.
This is we've talked this to death, but this is the project in question, the $3 million project, and the part of it that could go away is that portion that's on Highway 97. Next step, so we intend to bring this back to you at your next regular meeting. We'll bring you back the second amendment. We'll bring you back the additional information that you asked for. At that time, you've got options like you do with any decision. You can vote to approve it. You can vote to deny it. You can kick it back with a modification to the city of Raleigh. You can table it for a specific reason that you just want some additional information. Table it because you just want more time. When we bring something back to you, you don't have to act on it. You've got options, and that's for any decision. But that's the intent. So with that said, I know we just rolled a lot out on you. And you can ask me anytime. If it just pops to you and you want to send me an email or give me a call, feel free to do so. But while we've got the group together, is there any questions or comments?
So the $3 million question equates in time to being a 6-month question? Because you're saying every month there's 500, it's worth approximately $500,000 Or are these two not connected?
Yeah, I
Am
don't
I
think-
not understanding that portion of it?
I don't think they're connected because it all comes down to how the discounting or the compounding of the original bill was. So this Highway 97, it was part of the original bill. So if this is how much we owed them in the beginning of time and that gets reduced, it has a much bigger impact from a compounding standpoint than giving them just 500,000. So what they're doing is they're going back in time. When we merged this system, they laid out all the projects that the town of Zebulon was responsible for, and the price tag was however many millions of dollars. They're going back to that day one, and they're saying, okay, we're reducing it by this. They're reducing other projects as well, but the 3 million is the biggest impact.
Okay.
Other questions or comments?
Just for knowing, how did Wendell go ahead and close out their performer?
Years back, they were very aggressive and sold back water and sewer.
They sold back the same time we did on the Second Amendment because, well, I won't go into that because y'all heard me talk enough tonight, but that's when they gave back some of theirs. I think they gave back about the same as us, if I'm not mistaken. Could have been more, could have been less, I don't really remember and don't care. I was just wondering what they did in this case.
So what they did, in addition to selling back, and I'd have to verify how much they sold back, I got the impression they sold back more than Zebulon did. They've closed out, and when you take a look at Wendell Falls as an example, you can see why.
So you think Wendell Falls pushed them?
I think so. As a result of that, I think their ratepayers have dropped by $45 a month, and I would expect Zebulon would be $50, $55 a month.
But in actual growth numbers, we're close to what Wendell Falls is. We're not. I thought there were 4,000 some homes in Wendell Falls.
There will be, but they have several other developments that come online because of Wendell Falls,
Commercial?
both commercial and residential.
Okay. I just thought we were, I'm not playing tit for tat with them, but I just thought we was somewhere close.
Over the past several years, their growth percentage has been higher than ours.
Okay, I get it. That's fine. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Okay, thank you.
All right. Anything else, Justin?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we have a closed session for North Carolina General Statutes 143 through 18.11A5 to instruct staff or negotiating agents concerning the position to be taken on behalf of the town of Zebulon in negotiating the price and other material terms of a contract or proposed contract for the acquisition of real properties by purchase, option, exchange, or lease, or hook or crook. Do we have a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. All right.